welcome to our last look-in this week. We're going to be looking at another isolation meditation as we think about the character of Jonah. And the story of Jonah begins where the word of the Lord comes to Jonah, and he's told to go to the people of Nineveh, and he's told to preach to them, to tell them of their need of trusting in God. And Jonah decides that he would rather do anything but go to these people. And so he goes to the port of Joppa, and he's prepared to go to the far end of the known world, Tarshish, which is in modern-day Spain, the far end of the known world. He's prepared to run away. He thinks he's running away from the presence of God. And we know that God has other plans to isolate him in order to teach him that he needs to obey God. Let's take up the chapter here in chapter 2. Then Jonah prayed to the Lord his God from the belly of the fish, because Jonah boards a ship, trying to get away from God. The sailors throw him overboard, and a great fish swallows him up. I called out to the Lord of my distress, and he answered me. Out of the belly I cried, and you heard my voice, for you cast me into the deep, into the heart of the seas, and the floods surrounded me. All your waves and your billows passed over me. And then I said, I am driven away from your sight. Yet I shall look again upon your holy temple. The waters closed in over me to take my life. The deep surrounded me. Weeds were wrapped around my head. And the roots of the mountains, I went down to the land, whose bars closed upon me forever. Yet you brought up my life from the pit, O Lord my God. When my life was fainting away, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came to you, into your holy temple. Those who pay regard to vain idols forsake their hope of steadfast love. But I, with the voice of thanksgiving, will sacrifice to you. What I have vowed I will pay. Salvation belongs to the Lord. And the Lord spoke to the fish, and it vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. So here we have Jonah, and he ends up in the belly of the great fish. And in that fish, he has a feeling of horror, a feeling of hope, and a feeling of hell. I think he thinks that he's going to die. Wouldn't you, if a great fish swallowed you whole? And as he speaks here, there's a real sense that he realizes that he could die. But he realizes at the end of his great cry, as he is still living, that actually salvation belongs to the Lord. Salvation belongs to God. In the great belly of the fish, he realizes that actually God is preserving him and God is saving him. And Jonah does go to Nineveh. Jonah goes and he preaches, and Nineveh repents. And then Jonah is cross and angry with the Ninevites for trusting in God. And he's cross at God for not bringing calamity and disaster upon the people. It's a bit of a sad story in how it ends. But as Jonah is isolated in the belly of the fish, he's isolated, he has nowhere else to go. He realizes that he's been running from God, running from God's presence, running from God's call, running from what God has commanded and called him to do. And I wonder if, like Jonah at this time of isolation, you're not in the belly of a fish, but I wonder, have you realized that you've been running from God? Running in two ways. Perhaps God has been asking you, he's been calling you, commanding you to do something for him. Take up some ministry perhaps in the church. Perhaps get involved in some organization. Perhaps he's been asking you, calling you to get involved in children's ministry, youth ministry, ministry for seniors. Perhaps he's been calling you or asking you to get involved in some form of ministry. Perhaps he's been calling you to perhaps embrace the call to the mission field, to do something for him perhaps short term in the summer, whenever we're able to, or perhaps long term, or maybe into full-time Christian service itself. Maybe he's calling you specifically by name to trust in him, to realize that he is standing and that you need to trust in him, to call on his name. The New Testament says that we can call upon the name of Jesus and we can be saved. Maybe as he's calling, as he's speaking, the same way they called Jonah, maybe he's calling and speaking to you. Unsaved person, he's calling on you to trust in him. Christian person, maybe he's calling you to do something, to work for him in these days. Thank you.